Okay, good evening and welcome, and thank you all for being here. As I mentioned, some of you may be coming off of the school district's webinar meeting they had, and I know that your mind is probably swirling with all that information. If you missed that and you're interested, I do know they recorded it, and we are recording this as well this evening. You can share out with those who aren't able to attend, or if you want to share it with maybe the other caregiver in your family who wasn't able to join because they were taking care of the kiddos. So my name is Michelle Ritter, and I'm a member of Mercer Island Parent Edge. And for those of you who don't know, Parent Edge is made up of parent volunteers from the community, and we are part of the Mercer Island PTA Council. And the PTA Council is made up of all of the PTAs on the island. So the 4 elementary schools, the middle school, the high school, and also Mercer Island Preschool Association. So we're very excited to offer this program tonight. We know that MIPA is a important part of our community, and hopefully all of you are aware of their resources and maybe even involved in the organization. We're offering this program tonight in conjunction with Mercer Island Youth and Family Services, and great partner, and also offers some wonderful services on the island, including some school-based counselors, which we're so lucky to have that resource available to our students and our families. We wanted to offer this program tonight because we know parents need support right now. And this is the 3rd in our series. We've also had programs for elementary kids, and last night we had one for teens and tweens. And tonight we're focusing on the youngest children, so preschool through 1st grade. And we're hoping to offer you some support, reassurance, and some real tangible tips that will help you be more effective in your parenting. Let me click through my slides here. We wanted to share some resources with you. First of all, Mercer Island Youth and Family Services has a great website, and their intake line, if you are in need of counseling, that is the number you'd want to call to start with. They offer a variety of counseling services, and at a minimum can direct you to the right place or offer up some referral to help you find the help that you need. And Mercer Island Parent Edge, we have a great website as well with resources, a wide range of children's ages and issues, and we invite you to visit that and look at those resources. I am going to turn it over to Rachel Montgomery, and she is with Mercer Island Youth and Family Services, and I'll let her talk a little bit about a great program. Tamby Cork, who's also with Mercer Island Youth and Family Services, with us this evening. They're going to talk about Incredible Years Parenting for those of you who may not be familiar with it.
Thank you, Michelle. To complement all the great existing programs on the island, we'll be offering an Incredible Years series. This will be the first of the year, happening this winter. It was developed with the University of Washington, and we'll be offering the series in partnership with their staff, as well as Dr. Bell, who's here with us today. This series will be for parents of preschoolers specifically. Some of you may be familiar with the programs offered throughout the region. And we're fortunate to have the funding through the Healthy Youth Initiative with Youth and Family Services to offer this program just for island parents. So it's really a great opportunity to connect and create some community, strategize in real time with parents all going through similar experiences, and then just learn some additional approaches to social and emotional development during these very unique times and after.
Yeah, and I'm very excited to be a part of this as well. Incredible Years is I just think one of the best interventions out there right now. And it's so good for families. It lends itself really well to an online format. So I think it's going to be a really nice way to do that virtually.
Thank you. And the information is here. If you can reach out to Rachel, or if you go to their website, you'll be able to find some information as well. And just to note, as I mentioned, we'll be recording this program, and we will also share out phone numbers and websites and other resources that the panelists will be talking about tonight. So if you want to take notes, that's great, but just know that we'll be sending all this information out as well. I would like to introduce our panelists for this evening. We are thrilled. We have a variety of experts who know the community. Dr. Zeev Bell is a clinical psychologist with, correct me if I'm wrong, Mercer Island Therapy. Melissa Benaroya is a parent coach and author, and also a speaker, and she has 2 kids, is that right, in school in Mercer Island? And Dr. Liz Evans is a doctor at Mercer Island Pediatrics, and Dr. Evans also has kids in the school district. You've met Rachel and Tamby with MIYFS, and then you'll also be meeting Lori Cohen-Sanford, who is will be assisting with the question and answer session portion of our program. We decided to break this down into themes. We know that there are so many things we could talk about tonight, and we could probably talk for many hours, but we're going to try to narrow it down. And the themes that we've come up with are social emotional health, the impact of screen time, and behavioral challenges. And what we will do is we'll lead each discussion with a question. And then if you have questions related to that topic, feel free to put it in the chat and we will ask the questions of our panelists. If you would like to send it, you can send it to everyone in the chat, or if you'd like it to be anonymous, feel free to send it either to me, Michelle, or to Lori Cohen-Sanford, and she has Lori Q&A. Actually, if you just want to send it to Lori, she can look through those questions and she'll make sure they get answered if you want to ask that anonymously. One thing I did want to note is, you know, I was thinking about this program, and my kids are a little bit older right now, and I was thinking how I missed the age of the younger kids. But I remember the mantra that I had at that age was, "This too shall pass, this too shall pass." And I've used that mantra actually during this really challenging time. And I remember one day I was like, what if it doesn't pass? What if this is the new normal? So I'm hoping this too shall pass. And that helped me get through those toddler years and those challenging years where I think I questioned every part of my parenting and then realized that you never get it right. And it changes when you do, as soon as you figure it out. So I am going to turn it over to our panelists, and they're going to start by introducing themselves and then sharing a little bit first off of what kind of things they're hearing from clients and patients, or just from this age group right now. So I will turn it over.
Yeah, I can start. It's fantastic to be here. So my name is Dr. Zeev Bell. I'm at Mercer Island Therapy. And most of my research is on developmental trajectories among kids with ADHD, and also on behavior management training interventions like the Incredible Years, as well as PCIT and the Positive Parenting Program and a number of other very similar programs. And so a lot of my work is with parents of young kiddos, usually parents who have kiddos with pretty significant disruptive behaviors. And so I love talking about, you know, what works specifically for those kiddos, and also how a lot of those strategies can benefit most kids, or at least most kids really like a lot of those kind of parenting strategies. Right now, I'm seeing a ton of kiddos who are having trouble kind of regulating themselves at home, especially young kiddos who need a lot of support and supervision at home. And, you know, their parents are trying to work from home and get things done. And so, you know, I think for a lot of parents who are struggling with what do I do when everyone's at home all the time, you're in a big boat with a lot of other people. And then I think I'm also seeing a lot of parents who are trying to figure out what the balance with screens is, that screens are really good at captivating children's attention, and it can help parents get things done that they need to get done. And then that can interfere with school. And so trying to figure out what's the right balance and how to, you know, use electronics mindfully and in a way that matches your values as a family. So I think those are some of the things that I'm seeing. I imagine, you know, that Melissa and Dr. Evans are seeing similar things. And so, yeah, looking forward to talking about strategies for what we can do.
Hi, I'm Melissa Benaroya, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker. So I am a trained therapist, but I actually practice as a parent coach because I work with parents that have children with behavior challenges that are completely typical, that there's no diagnosis, there's nothing wrong with the child. And it's just difficult being a parent. So I work with parents on, you know, similar to Dr. Zeev, screens, listening, cooperation, getting on Zoom, getting off Zoom, right? All of those challenges. In addition to being a clinician, I'm trained in positive discipline, which is based on Adlerian psychology. So a lot of my practice is based on positive discipline. I'm also a certified Gottman educator. So I teach Dr. Gottman's classes on emotion coaching and couple relationships. I also integrate a lot of conscious leadership and conscious parenting into the work that I do. Every family is unique. Like Dr. Zeev said, there are a lot of similarities. We're all kind of in the same boat, but there's lots of different flavors. So I spend a lot of my week working one-on-one with families, but I also provide parent education at schools. And I'm now speaking to a lot of schools and companies, which is really great because mental health for working parents is a big issue. So I'm seeing a lot more of people reaching out and wanting resources for their employees to support them as parents, since that balancing act between work and home is even more challenging than it's been in the past. It's always been a challenge, but right now there's a huge escalation of mental health challenges for parents, which then some of that trickles down into children's behaviors. So I work primarily with parents, and typically when we're not on Zoom, I get to spend time with young children in the classroom, which I love and miss since I have teenagers. I'll turn over to Dr. Evans.
Thanks. So I'm Liz Evans. I'm one of the pediatricians at Mercer Island Pediatrics, and I have 3 kids who, unfortunately, I don't get to experience some of this young, fun energy. I've got 3 teenage girls, 13, 15, and 17, and there is no house big enough for 3 teenage girls spending all day with each other. So I think in the office, we are seeing, typical, during our well child visits, we're seeing some clinical depression and clinical anxiety, but we're seeing a lot of regression in the age group that we're talking about tonight. We're seeing some frustration, some behavior challenges. And I think one of the problems that we have is that you guys are missing out on your social lives too, where you get to connect with other parents and realize that you are not the only one and your children are not the only ones who are having trouble. I think when I talk about my own kids struggling, parents look at me and they're like, wow. And we don't get to hang out at the park and talk about the challenges we're having with our children and get that support and that network that we used to be able to have. So I think that this is a great opportunity to normalize what is going on with your children, and that what they're going through and the behavior challenges that you may be seeing are happening across the board and across the ages. So glad to be here.
Thank you, everyone, for that introduction. I think that's so true, how helpful it is when you realize that you're not the only one going through it. I remember some of those moments, and even now where I'm like, oh, okay, this is somewhat normal. Otherwise, you feel very isolated. So hopefully tonight will at least in that way give us all a little support to say, okay, everyone's dealing with this as well, because we miss having that coffee with a friend or meeting up in the park and just sharing and getting that input. So good point. Okay, we'll start with our first question on social emotional health. Since schools closed last spring, some kids have been back at in-person settings such as daycare or group pod learning, while others have remained at home. All kids have been impacted by the restrictions on seeing teachers, friends, and family members, and that's been hard on the kids as well as all of us adults. What advice can you give to parents who are concerned about maintaining their child's social and emotional health in the short term and the long term, and what impacts?
I would say overall, I think if you have the ability to interact with your child regularly, that you can actually provide and meet most of those needs so they meet milestones developmentally over this period of time that we're locked down. Hopefully it's not much longer, but I think that just being mindful that we create a safe environment where there's lots of interaction, and it can be in the home, it can be walking out in the neighborhood. But I do hear a lot of worry coming from parents like, is my child going to be delayed? Are they not going to know how to socialize? And I think we don't give ourselves enough credit that there's a lot we do. So even just, your stream of consciousness, just talking out loud throughout the day is some great input and a lot of value for kids, even especially when you're problem solving, right? There's a challenge, you have a big emotion. I think modeling your ability to regulate your emotions and problem solve are just two great skills that kids of any age can benefit from, but especially right now, because I'm sure most of you have noticed what little sponges you have at home, that they're mimicking everything. So I think just being really intentional about how we're showing up, how we're regulating, how we're taking care of ourselves is a really big piece of our children's social emotional development.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. As I was thinking about these themes and initial questions that we're talking about, a lot of it comes back to modeling, that children will copy what they see done. And so, right, I don't want to add additional pressure to what parents are already doing. And really noticing that, yeah, your kiddos are little sponges and that they'll pick up on what you're doing. And so if you're finding ways to adapt to still be social during this quarantine, your kids are also going to do the same thing.
Yeah, to piggyback, lots of great points. I don't think we give ourselves enough credit. You know, we just think of our homes as a boring place, that there's nothing new, there's nothing social going on, and that's not true. I think there's so much that we can model for our kids at home, and that it's a very different outlook, but there's, oh, look, the mailman's here, or look, I'm cooking. Let's, go through all the things that are in the kitchen. Where did they come from? And let's talk about the farmer that made them, like all of these things. I just think we don't give ourselves enough credit for the amount of socialization that we teach our kids. Mm-hmm. But I agree with both of you that you have to be somewhat intentional about it. And it's a new skill that we have to do as parents, to talk through everything that we're doing.
Yeah. And one other thing I was thinking about as you were speaking was that during typical times, we're rushing through our days and we end up doing a lot for our children, right? And they're much more capable than we give them credit for. So I think this is kind of maybe a silver lining, is that we have more space and we have more time to be patient and walk through things and kind of step back a little bit and give our kids a space to experiment and try new things that typically we might have stepped in for and done for them. So I think that there's a great opportunity here for kids to build competencies that they might have not developed so early, or they might have if we hadn't been stepping in so much. So being mindful that, our kids can do a lot more than we give them credit for. And if we model it, we're patient, we walk them through it, they're going to be able to pick up some new skills that they wouldn't otherwise as quickly or readily during typical times.
Yeah, I was also, to add one more point to that, I was thinking that we might also not be giving the kids enough credit that children have a tremendous amount of neuroplasticity, that their brains are really adaptable and change to match what is needed of them in their environment. And so even though this is a weird time, they will be able to adapt to all of the kind of new social interactions over Zoom, with relatives that previous generations of kids haven't had, and they'll be able to adapt when things open up again, and they're able to have the kind of more traditional school or day school experiences.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that the neuroplasticity and being mindful that they can adapt to anything, they can cope, they're resilient. And a lot of that depends on us as parents and what we're modeling again, right? So many times we are putting our self-care aside because we've got to meet the needs of everybody else that's present, and being mindful that it's actually very selfless to be doing some of the self-care, especially in front of our children, because the more resilient we are, the more able that we can cope with some of these challenges and stressors, the better our kids are going to be. So instead of focusing so much on our kids and what can we do with our kids, just focusing on ourselves and how we're showing up and how we're taking care of ourselves can make a huge difference.
I just have a really quick question. Do we want to hold all questions to the end, or do we want to ask questions that are on topic during?
I would say if you have a topic, go ahead and share it.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, I had a question from a parent asking, this is great information, but what might they be missing without the peer-to-peer interaction? Does anybody want to talk to that?
Yeah, I think there's some basic skills that kids these age are learning, which once again, they don't actually have to miss. So sharing is a big one, taking turns, patience, like that emotional and regulation and impulse control, like that's developing over time. And, you know, being with other kids is kind of a playground and a constant test of all of those skills. But those are things that we can still bring into our play with children as well. So I know it feels like, God, our kids are missing so much, and they are missing bits and pieces, but I think we can still compensate for a lot of those skills, like being a good loser, right? Like that's a really tough skill early on. Like we can play board games like nobody's business during COVID. So here's a great opportunity to build that muscle for them, right?
Yeah, I was also thinking there's a lot of research for child development showing that even one friend is a total game changer, that children with one friend and many, many friends look very, very similar. The kids who look different are the kids with zero friends. And so having even one friend is a huge benefit for all sorts of socio-emotional development. And so thinking about, you know, yes, our kiddos now are spending less time in large groups, but that may actually be less important than if they're still spending time with at least one other same age peer.
I agree. We are seeing a lot of families pot up with other families, or just picking somebody that they align with as far as their restrictions and what their expectations are. And I think that's really nice if families can find that. And I think in our community, we're small enough that it hasn't been hard for a lot of families. So I think you're right. One thing that I would just piggyback on that was actually said by Derek Franklin at one of the other Parent Edge talks was getting rid of the should. Like, I should be giving my kid this. I should be doing this. I should, as a good parent, do this. And really trying to let that go, that it doesn't have to be the same for every family, and you don't have to do it one way, and there isn't the right way or the best way. And so every kid's going to be a little different, and every parent-child interaction is going to be different. I do think that obviously our children act very different to us than to their peers or their teachers or their coaches, right? I outsourced swim lessons. I outsourced drive lessons because I couldn't do it for my kids. And so they do act different, and we have to act different now for play. It has to be on their terms sometimes. Sometimes we want to dominate how that play or that lesson should go. And one of the things about peer-to-peer interaction is it doesn't usually work that way. So sometimes for a brief moment of the day, we can drop the I'm the parent, I'm in charge, and let them be in charge for a brief period of time for that play. I think that's important.
I remember when the virus first began and everyone was trying to figure out how do we handle this. I read an article and it said, this isn't the parenting Olympics. And when you realize that, you win. And that was such a aha moment, like, oh yeah, this may not be the year where we achieve great things, but someone had said, if we come out of this all mentally healthy and intact, we won. So I think that is a good reminder that we shouldn't be saying what should. We need to think about what we can do. Lori, did you have another question to follow up?
I had one more quick question related to this topic. A parent has asked that their toddler, 3-year-old child has been starting to seek out friends now that the playgrounds are open. but the parent is concerned about her child getting too close to other kids, and she's wanting to know how can they explain to her and to the other children without scaring them about this strange time that we're in. Any advice?
Well, I think it's hard for me to explain it to adults what they need to be doing. First of all, I seem to be having the same conversations over and over what parents and adults should be doing. So I can imagine that it's difficult to explain that to a preschooler. So I would say that you just have to be honest, and you have to lay it out in very simple terms about what's going on. And they know that life has changed. It's not like they're oblivious to, they may not be able to explain it, but they see the differences. And so you can point those differences out. You know, how we don't go to church on Sundays in a big group anymore. Have you know how we haven't seen grandma for a while. You know, what have you noticed that looks different? So because of those things, now when we go to the playground, things are different. And so these are the new rules that we have to follow. And also saying, I know that might be frustrating. I know that might be sad for you. And, you know, talk through those feelings. I think for preschoolers, one of the best things that we can teach them is to connect to those emotions. Why are they crying? Are they frustrated? Are they angry? Are they sad? Are they, you know, happy? What is going on? There's so many different emotions, and they have a hard time sometimes putting a label on it. But the more that they can label how they're feeling, I think the easier it becomes to communicate, right? So that would be my suggestion.
Yeah, those are great suggestions. It's, yeah, the big emotions, because we know if we don't allow space for that emotion, they just escalate, right? So empathizing and allowing our child to feel heard is so important. I think too, in thinking about approaching the playground with our child, and talking about, like Dr. Evans said, you know, just about the realities, plain and simple. We can also be mindful of focusing on what kids can do at the park versus what they can't do. So I think, you know, before we get there, we come up with a plan of, we can go on the swing, you can wave to your friend, right? Like talk about like ways they can engage versus can't, because when we focus on can't, that sometimes that actually reinforces some of those things. So just being mindful of having that plan of what we can do when we get there versus the can't.
I think that's fantastic. I don't have much to add on to that.
Well, hopefully that answered their question.
Following up on that comment you made, Melissa, about big emotions, last night in the program for tweens and teens, one of the parents had asked, I'm seeing parts of my child that I've never seen before, and they're seeing parts of me. And they were kind of referring to maybe the anxiety or the stress or the whatever. And they said, how do we manage that? And the panelists there had said, you know, little kids will watch you and they might sense something is off, but older kids, they know when you're like faking it, when you're trying to pretend everything is okay. So how do we as parents manage our emotions? Like, it's okay for us to be anxious, but how do we do that without frightening younger kids? Or how do we have those big emotions? Because we haven't all been through a pandemic either. So they don't even know what a pandemic is, and we're trying to figure it out and multi-layered. How do you approach that?
Well, I think like Dr. Evans said, that we just are completely honest about how we're feeling and what we're feeling. And then also sharing what we do to cope. Like, mommy needs a break because I've been on 5 Zoom meetings and I just made 2 meals for you. So I need 5 minutes, right? So I think equally important is acknowledging that we have these emotions. It's really healthy for them to know that we're experiencing this, because it normalizes it for them. And it teaches that emotions aren't good or bad. They're all just normal. So it's okay to feel this way. It's what we do with these emotions that is really key, right? So how do I express frustration and anger? And then how do I take care of myself when I'm feeling that way?
And I think, you know, we're all going to lose our cool at some point. Well, I would say 99.9% of us are going to lose our cool at some point, and you know, our temper is going to flare, or we're going to say something that we didn't mean. We're all human. And so our kids do it. Why do we think that we're never going to do it? And we must be the worst parent if we lost our cool. No, I mean, we get flooded with emotions too. And so when we are flooded and overwhelmed and we lose our cool, then we need to take a step back. And then that's a great opportunity to come back when we're calm, just like we ask our kids to come back when they're calm, and then talk about it and say, Mommy's sorry, I lost my cool. I should not have done that. Help me to figure out a way to make this better, or to do it better the next time. Or I think this means that Mommy needs to take a little break. You know, and so just being very honest with ourselves that it's okay, we're going to make mistakes. That's what parenting is, right? A series of mistakes and learning from them. And so if we want to model our children to come back after having big emotions and a meltdown and be able to talk about it with us, then we have to do it with our children.
100%. And I'm guilty of losing it and needing to repair, right?
Right.
I saw through all my fun work I get to do with Parent Edge, I watch a lot of different parenting speakers, and I just watched some last night. Tina Payne Bryson, some of you may know her. She does a lot of work with kids, and she said that she and another person were speaking, and they said 70% of the time parents get it wrong. And it's that 30% that we get to come back and try again, and that we're showing our kids that. And everything that you've said about just modeling that and taking time for ourselves is so important. And the other thing she said that I thought was great was she pictures her kids with the volume button on their bellies. And she's always trying to figure out how to tune in to what her kids need to turn that up or to turn that down. And so I just thought that was great. I thought I might add that.
It's cute.
Okay, we will move on to the next topic, but if you have more questions on social emotional, feel free to share them in the chat or with Lori, and we will get to those later. The next is the impact of screens. And I know we touched upon this, but with limits on social activities, sports, scheduled group activities, visits with family, there's been an increase in the time that our kids are spending on screens, either for remote schooling or when interacting with their family and friends. What recommendations do you have for parents on the amounts of time considered reasonable for younger kids to spend? And I don't know if we want to say reasonable, because then that once again is the should, but if we want to help our kids. And then are all screens the same as far as the impact on younger kids?
That's a big topic.
Yes. I said we could have a whole evening just talking about
this. Yes, we can. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think Dr. Evans can rely on the American Pediatric Association and the World Health Organization. I mean, basically, young kids shouldn't, I'm using the word shouldn't, but this is what they're saying, generally shouldn't have more than an hour, hour and a half of screen time. And I'm saying hour and a half, closer to like those 5-year-olds. I know we have some parents of older kids on the call here. I think, you know, where we're at right now, we kind of have to differentiate a little bit about what screen time looks like, because this is where our kids are socializing a lot with family and friends right now. So there's kind of like the entertainment, educational screen time, and then there's interacting, connecting screen time. And so overall, kind of what I've been seeing as the norm and recommendations is that we don't necessarily put a limit on the amount of time they can talk to grandma and grandpa over Zoom or interact with other children in a preschool setting. I know I work with a preschool that does completely online preschool all week, and it's been very successful, and kids are connecting and getting a lot out of it. So definitely wouldn't want to put a limit on those small opportunities for connection outside of the home for kids, but just being mindful about in the entertainment realm, what it is we're showing. So there are lots of educational type of programs. I think regardless of what it is your child's consuming, that you do the research first on what it is they are interested in. It's amazing how they like come up with ideas that you've never heard of, or they know of programs or people, characters. So just doing some research. And then when they are on screens, try to use that as an opportunity to connect and interact with them as well. So we don't, like Dr. Bell said, it is nice when we need a little break sometimes to rely on those screens, but as much as we can be involved in asking questions, because there's lots of learning opportunities there and also opportunities for us to connect with our child and learn about who they are at the same time. So I don't think it's all bad, but I do think we need to be clear on what the limits are for our family and what works for us, and then be very clear in explaining that to our kids as well. So talking about what we can watch, when we can watch it, where we can watch it, with who. I think setting that up front with our kids makes it easier, because one of the challenges that I'm sure Dr. Bell and Dr. Evans have heard, that like the biggest challenge is like turning off the screen. Right? That's when the meltdown hits, right? The lights go out and the emotions explode. So I think having a plan ahead of time so they know and what to expect, and offering them lots of choices around how that's going to happen. So when you're done with your, Daniel Tiger show, do you want me to turn it off or do you want to turn it off? So giving them a little bit of control around these things can also be helpful, but clear expectations and involving them in creating and making some choices, I think, can be helpful in managing it.
So, Michelle put in the chat box Common Sense Media, which is a great resource if you haven't looked at it, for older kids, younger kids. It really goes through apps and movies and TV shows and talks about what are the different things that might be negative in there or you might not want your child to see, and what are the ages that they believe it would be appropriate for. So I think that's a great resource for parents. So the AAP says that 18 to 24 months that it should be with a parent if there is going to be screen time, and it should be educational programming, PBS Kids, something that is kind of tried and true programming. And then from 2 to 5, it's usually less than an hour. But I think we all know that there are different kids, and some kids can't handle an hour. And some kids can handle 2 hours because they spent 2 hours playing outside during the day, and they spent an hour helping mom cook dinner, and they spent an hour helping dad rake the leaves, and they're just fine doing 2 hours that day. You guys know your kids. If it's a battle after 30 minutes and it's a meltdown, maybe that's not 30 minutes can't work for your child. So I hate to put universal, I know the American Academy of Pediatrics puts kind of these guidelines out for parents, but you know your child best. And so, there's that kid that does all of these activities and is getting lots of exercise. And there's also the kid that's playing video games for 6 hours and is completely sedentary on the couch. So huge difference, right? And so you have to make your own family guidelines. I would say that one of the most important things is to supervise young children. I think that the statistic is that I can't remember, but it's well past the majority of kids will have seen porn by the age of 11. So unfortunately, if they're left to a computer, not that they're searching for anything, it's just out there, and anything they put in YouTube can be a problem. And so I think YouTube is one of those very addictive platforms for kids. There's other social media that it is made, those games that are on phones are made to be addictive. They're addictive to me. I got into a Candy Crush habit at one point that was really ugly. So we know ourselves have issues, so why wouldn't our kids? And so we need to be mindful of that. And so the more supervision we have and the more interaction, like Melissa was saying about, okay, so we gave our child 30 minutes of Daniel Tiger, that's great. Afterward, so we could cook dinner or we could get some work done. Afterwards, can we ask them, what was the story about? Can you tell me what Daniel Tiger did during that episode? Why did he do that? You know, what was the story? I mean, just all these questions to just then interact with them. So it's not completely just, you know, them getting no emotional connection with that time.
Yeah, I think to address what Michelle had mentioned, that the trickiest part is the limit setting, is the saying no more, it's done. And I think a couple of just practical things, giving some transition warnings. So saying you got 10 minutes left, you got 5 minutes left, you got 2 minutes left, you got 30 seconds left, you got 10 seconds left, right? And again, depending on the kid, they might not need any transition warning at all, or they might need several. And then thinking about your response when you say, okay, the time is done, and what is their response? Because, you know, like Dr. Evans said, these apps and games and shows are specifically designed to captivate attention. And so your kiddo is probably going to try all sorts of things to relax that limit, to get you to say, okay, fine, you can have 5 or 10 more minutes. And if you let them have it, you'll probably see more of that behavior in the future. And so thinking about what is your response, or can you decide, and can both parents decide on a consistent response? Because otherwise kids are going to learn, oh, dad will let me have 5 more minutes. So I'm going to make sure to be around dad when, you know, the time is up. And so trying to figure out, you know, what is a consistent response that you feel like you can have consistently, so that your kiddo really learns, okay, when the TV show is over, it's time to be done, time to hand back that dad.
Yeah, and I think to piggyback on what you just shared, Dr. Bell, that response when they're not gonna be happy and like, let's move on to the next thing, yay, right? There's usually frustration, anger, sadness, and that's a great place to use empathy. Like, it's so hard when you're loving the Daniel Tiger show and it's time to, you know, start getting ready for dinner. Do you want to set the table, or do you want to do the salad spinner? So we acknowledge their frustration, we acknowledge them, and we empathize, and it just lets them know, like, I hear you, I see you, without kind of ignoring that, and then moving on, not engaging in the dialogue. Because like you said, they're going to try to pull you in. That's their job, is to push the limits, and our job is to hold the line. And the more that we give in, and the more that we're like soft and squishy, the more we're encouraging that behavior to push, right? I think one thing too that is super important, and you know, we answered this in the last question too, is just being mindful of what we're modeling and using screens too. So if we tell our child, you know, you gotta turn off the video, and then we pick up our phone to answer an email or something, we're not modeling that regulation as well. So just being mindful of how much we're on screens in front of our kids is definitely going to affect their behavior and their desire to want to be on screens as well.
And I guess I should talk about some of the medical implications of increased screen time. So sleep is such a big thing for me. We know that sleep and lack of good sleep can influence behavior quite a bit. So making sure that electronics are not to fall asleep with, right? An hour preferably before bed, electronics should be off. And whether that's a Kindle that they're reading their book, it doesn't matter if it's good screen time or bad screen time. It's really, the screens need to be off. I never like to hear that there's a television in the bedroom. And so I'm very mindful as kids have more and more electronics that the rules are set. The holidays are upon us. And so some of your children may be getting an iPad, or maybe getting a Kindle, or maybe getting some piece of equipment. And so setting up that contract and those expectations early, it makes it much easier when you get to high school if the rule has always been that the electronics are plugged in outside of the bedroom. I can't tell you how many teens tell me, but they need their iPhone in their room to get them up in the morning. And I'm like, no, there's something called an alarm clock. It's really old fashioned, but you can get one. So setting up that expectation that all screens are out of the bedroom, I think is a good idea, and not to be used right before bedtime. Another thing that can be impactful is the amount of screen time and our vision. So unfortunately, more and more of the world is becoming like me and nearsighted. And it's because we focus so much on the close distance. We're right next to a screen. We're right next to the computer. This actually goes for reading too. Kids that read for extended periods of time in bed, especially in low light, can be a strain. And so setting up, if your child is in school, setting up next to a window, taking breaks. So even if you allow your child more screen time, take 30-minute breaks and refocus your eyes. The outdoors in nature is super important for doing that, because there's so many distances that we're looking at when we're in nature. It's better for our eyes. So to protect vision, taking breaks and not having prolonged screen time, these Zoom meetings that last for hours of our day are actually not doing great things for our vision. So, and then also when we talk about kind of the school age kid, I know that's not exactly where we are tonight, but we're seeing kids with headaches and complaining of their tummy aches and things like that. And you also have to think about, what is the positioning? Are they in bed and they're on their electronics? Is everything set up well for them? So something else to consider from the medical world.
Yeah, and another thing that I've seen from the medical world was well, to add to that, is the effect on children's health and weight. That screens haven't necessarily always been bad. The problem is when it gets in the way of other activities, right? Socializing, getting outside, playing, all of those things. So when screens get in the way of those activities, that's when it becomes an issue. And they have seen an increase in weight gain in children the more that they have access to screens as well. So just being mindful that those breaks in nature are awesome, and get outside and run around in nature at the same time. Protect your health, your body, and your eyes all at once.
So I think in the reality of today's world, some parents are trying to manage full-time jobs with toddlers at home or young kids. So what suggestions do you have to create those interactive or enriching experiences and balancing everything that are maybe some unguided activities while the parent is working? Because I think, at least for me, I know that's when I am apt to let my kids on screens more, when I need to focus or I need to get something done. And I can't be there with them. So especially for younger kids who are always like, can you play with me? Can you play with me? Do you have any suggestions for activities or how to guide them to be more independent?
I'm going to add a website to the chat that I really like. It's called Days with Gray, and she was a teacher, and she does these breakfast invitations. And so it's a time when she puts together little activities to do at the breakfast table while she's enjoying her coffee and just to connect. And then what she has seen and what we often see is if we can connect with our children and give them an activity and show some engagement, even for just that breakfast period, that they will then go off and play by themselves with those same things. So I'm going to add that link. I found it very helpful for preschool kids, and it doesn't take a lot. She's got lots of great breakfast invitations and ideas. So I'll add that in.
I love that breakfast invitation idea. And I use that a lot with the parents that I work with, not that breakfast invitation per se, but creating rituals of connection throughout our day. So when kids know and expect that they get this one-on-one, there's space for us to connect with them. It's easier for them to self-entertain in other spaces. So breakfast is great, but that's not going to meet their need for the whole day. So just being mindful of plugging those in throughout the day and having consistency and using some routine. And I love using routine charts with really young kids because they like to know what to expect. And if they can follow something, especially if it's like pictures of themselves and mom and dad, it's easier for them to self-manage. And then, you know, when they do have that time that they do need to self-entertain, coming up with a list or a basket of some of their favorite things that they can play with is a great time. So sometimes it's keeping those things really special. So it's not available to play with at any point, but like those moments where you've got to get on a Zoom call and they've got to self-entertain, like we get out the special basket. I use this at restaurants as well, but nobody's going to restaurants with their kids right now, but there's always nice to have like a special grab bag of fun things to do at restaurants to entertain kids so we don't have to pull out the screens.
Yeah, and I agree with 100% of what Melissa just said. And I think that piece of small doses of attention throughout the day can be really helpful because your attention is so powerful. I often tell families, like every second that you pay attention to your kid, you're basically handing them a dollar bill. And as you do that, they're going to want more of that attention. And so I think some families have this idea that like they'll be able to work through the whole day and then they'll give their kid a big lump sum of attention at the end of the day. And what can often be more effective is to kind of invest little bits of attention throughout the day. And by doing that, you'll actually get more time where you're able to respond to emails and try to work from home while your kid is able to self-manage because they've been getting this kind of consistent dose or kind of allowance of attention to continue that money analogy.
Yeah, I love that you said, like, we don't have to wait till the end of the day to be just completely present, that it can be as little as 5 minutes where I just get down on the floor, right? Yeah. 5 minutes doesn't seem like a lot to you and I, but there's a lot of connection that can take place on the floor in 5 minutes. Totally.
I know I have a 10 and a 15-year-old, so I often think about families that are having younger kids right now. And I don't know if any of you saw it, there was a video that kind of went viral, and this mom, and she's in the pantry, and she's like, my plan today was that I was going to organize my pantry. And she's like, and then my 4-year-old said that he would come help me. And she said, so now I'm shifting from being organized and doing a project to connecting with my child. And you could just see her, she was like talking herself off the ledge. And I was like, wow, I remember those days where you had to let it go. You just have to let it go and know that I'm going to make this moment really important. So I just thought that was, yeah, we all go through that. We are going to move to our last topic, and we'll also open up, keep in mind, keep asking questions if you have on these topics, or feel free to ask other questions as well, about behavioral challenges. The preschool first grade years provide lots of challenges on their own, and now we're in a pandemic, so add that to it. And so there's extra stresses, and many parents are experiencing behavioral changes with their young children. I think you talked about a little bit, some regression, maybe some power struggles. What suggestions do you have for parents to help them navigate this challenging time? Well, no one wants to touch that one.
I have so much. I don't want to take over.
Where do we start, right?
There's so much there. So I'll start with the basics, and then I'll hand it to the two experts that really spend their lives doing this. So I think routine, right? I am really big on routine. I love, a picture chart, what is our day going to look like? And yes, some of those days are going to fail, but okay, we're going to have breakfast, and then we're going to have some outdoor time. And remember that at preschool, the attention span is not very long. So I sometimes get a parent that says, why can't my preschooler color for 30 minutes? And I think, yeah, like 5 would be great, you know. So some, you know, don't expect that your kid's going to be able to listen to you and do an activity necessarily for long periods of time. Some will get into some projects and really want to do that for a long time, but the attention span is quite small at this age. And so chunking out the day as much as you can. This is when we're going to go out for a walk, no matter if it's drizzly or sunny, we're going to go play outside, or we're going to, you know, do this project, or we're going to have craft time, or we're going to have Lego time. And this is the time that we're going to connect with a friend, or, you know, just chunking out the day and trying to keep routines. This age group especially, but I feel like any child really does benefit from a routine, even the teenagers. So I think that's one thing. I think consistency, talking to your co-parent is really important, to have that consistency. And what are the expectations of the house? What are the rules going to be? And we kind of talked about that a little bit with screen time, but I think that that's really important. Taking time to care for yourself, which Melissa has brought up many times. I think that's really important. And then the positive note, and you know, the two of you are probably better at talking about all the details with that, but the praise for all the positive things that are happening through the day, though, that attention that you place on that is invaluable. So I think that that's really important.
Yeah, I mirror all of that. I think routine you can't replace. I think having those rituals of connection, so those needs are being met. I think one big thing, especially at this age, is being mindful that your kiddos have this piggy bank that says control across the front. And if we're not giving them lots of things to control, they're going to look for places to control. And they're usually very disruptive places to control, because kiddos at this age, they control one single thing in this world, one thing, and that's their physical body. And that's why a lot of the struggles are around what goes on their body, right? Getting dressed, what goes in their body, eating, what's coming out of their body, toilet training, right? Going to sleep, getting in the car, all of those things. So just being mindful that we give kids lots of limited choices throughout the day. And we don't wait till there's a power struggle, because that just means like that piggy bank, that control piggy bank is empty, because they're going to start pushing back in those places. But if we give them lots of limited choices, and when I say limited choices, there's a limit, like, hey, we're eating breakfast right now and we can have Cheerios or Wheaties, right? So we're offering two things that we're okay with and we're willing to follow through on. It's not like, hey, what do you want for breakfast? I'll make whatever you want, if that's not something you're going to do. So being mindful, we give lots of limited choices just to fill up that bank account. And they learn that there's a limit. So the more they're given choices to have control over little things, the easier it's going to be for them to manage things when they have no control at all. Because sometimes there's a hard limit and there is no choice for them, that's great. But it's easier for them to manage and move through those moments with greater ease when they've had control over little things that really don't matter to you and I. Doesn't matter if I get out the Wheaties or the Cheerios? No. If it's pancakes or waffles? No. Right? But to them, now they've got some control. And when they say, I want the Cheerios, they're more likely to eat the Cheerios because they just said that out loud to you. So it reinforces the behavior. So I think just being mindful of giving our kids some control throughout their day, because we control everything. We control where they go, what they do, who they talk to, what's for breakfast, right? What clothes they're going to wear, whether or not they're going out of the house or not. And just empathizing with how hard it is to be a kid this age living in this very chaotic world. Like the world in general is pretty chaotic to them because they're growing and learning and exploring so much at this age. But with all of these restrictions and parents that are dealing with stress, it's even more chaotic. So just being mindful that like, we really got to empathize with kids when the milk is spilled, because that is really hard. That is really frustrating. They do feel those feelings very deeply, even though they don't make logical sense to you and I.
Yeah, and I think I'll kind of add more to the piece about praise. That, I mean, that is probably the number one and maybe cheapest thing that you can do is to pay attention to what is going right, or at least what's not going wrong. Make note of that, and ideally praise it and label that praise. Tell the kid why you're praising them. So thank you for doing this. I love it when I see you do this. Right? Oh, it makes me so happy when this happens. And the idea is to get you really fluent in that, because most of us are probably more fluent with the, hey, put that down, stop that, don't do that, than we are with the thank you. I love to see that. And not only does it work for preschoolers, it works for kids of all ages, right? You might have to adapt the tone of voice that you use and the words that you use, but it works for everybody, and it works for spouses too. It's amazing when you start noticing all the things that are going right. Those things tend to happen more, even from your partner. And it's also helpful for you. It helps you notice things and be more grateful to say, hey, you did the dishes, thank you for doing that. Or, hey, thanks for bringing me a cup of coffee. So I think praise, praise, praise. And in general, most kids can't get too much praise.
Yeah, and I might tweak that a little bit. I love the acknowledging, and I think acknowledging and encouraging is, there's we use a lot of these words synonymously, and they're a little bit different. So we don't want to necessarily use feedback that there's like some judgment attached to it. Like there's always that like good job, bad job kind of thing, which is really an extrinsic motivator, where we want kids to build intrinsic motivators to build that internal moral compass. So really focusing on just what they did, like, wow, you just did that by yourself. So it's not good or bad. They can kind of lay the judgment there themselves. But kind of taking our judgment out of that feedback can be even more powerful. Or, oh my gosh, I just noticed you used 5 colors in your picture today. Or, oh, you just drew a circle. So it's not good or bad, because they start to see through some of that. That's like, that wasn't a good picture. That was a scribble. Why was that? Why do you think that's so beautiful, right? They start to see through that. So being mindful too of the kind of feedback that we're giving. So I like to use the words encouragement or acknowledgement, just as a way of being mindful that it's not about me and how happy it makes me and how proud I am. It's like, how do you feel about it? Tell me more, right? So even asking lots of curiosity questions about what they're doing when they've done something for the first time, or they're doing something different, like, tell me how you figured that out. Tell me more about that. Are other ways to encourage kids at the same time, but it's still focusing on the positives, just like in a different little bit of a slant coming at it that way.
Thank you. Those are all great suggestions. And I know we have a flurry of questions coming Lori's way, so I'm gonna let her share some of those.
Sorry, I clicked the wrong thing. Okay, I've been somewhat keeping up, but I'm just gonna go from most current and then we'll go back. That way I can give myself a chance to scroll backwards. Questions about helping with sibling rivalry. We have a mom who has 4 kids, all elementary school age. Do you have any advice and tips for helping parents just have their kids getting along better?
I'm curious if there's a certain scenario or situation in general.
No, it's just saying everybody home with 4 kids from K through 6, there's a lot of fighting.
Yeah. Well, I think just being mindful that we all need our space, and how we're giving everybody space in the family. And we might not have a space for everybody at all times, but just making space for people throughout the day can be helpful. So in a family with that many children, you might want to sit down and be a little bit strategic about where people are taking calls, or where they can have their own like chill out time or quiet time. I think that might maybe missing for some of the kids, which then tends to escalate things. I think everybody having different roles in the family too can be helpful. So we all have responsibilities. So some of the collaborative responsibilities may be causing some of the stress between siblings. So everybody having something totally separate, and ideally letting them pick, what would you like to be responsible for? You want to do the dishes, or do you want to fold the clothes, or right, those types of things. Obviously preschoolers aren't doing those types of things, but like putting water in the kiddie's bowl, or right, so they can have some responsibility as well. It's a little bit different than older kids, but I think everybody having separate responsibilities and having some space to themselves, and also encouraging everybody exercising as well. And that may take a different shape and form for everybody in the family, but just being mindful, that's a really important place where we blow off steam. And so if somebody's not getting that, or multiple people aren't getting that, it's going to feed into the sibling dynamic too.
Yeah, I will also highlight something that Dr. Evans had said earlier, which is about routines, and thinking that most sibling conflict happens during unstructured time. And so the more unstructured time, the more likely that heads and elbows and things are going to bump. So seeing kind of having a routine for everyone, ideally even posting that routine so that everybody knows what everybody's supposed to be doing. And then again, helping, give each person roles depending on their developmental stage that is going to help them kind of stay busy and in some ways stay out of each other's way as well.
Okay. Yeah.
And I would just add with my pediatrician hat off and my mom hat on that this is normal, right?
Yeah.
Our kids are not meant to be together 24/7. And developmentally, they're searching for their past, I was at school from this time to this time, and then they could come back and they didn't have to be in the same space. So what I've seen with 3 teenage daughters at home is there have been some knockout, drag out fights. And they often occur right in front of me. And this may be where you have to let some of it go, that your kids are not different, and that this is them working out their frustrations, and it's okay. And I intervene when I see blood and when things are getting really ugly, but sometimes I just ignore it, and you're gonna fight, and that's okay, because that's also normal. And so we can definitely do the things to try and mitigate that, but also realize that this is a tough time. I love my spouse dearly, but I'm very glad, and I am very glad that I get to come to work and have my adult time and not with my kids 24/7. So I think we're all missing that, but our kids are resilient, and they are going to be lovely to each other at times. I'm sure as much as you've seen some ugliness and a lot more fighting, you've also seen more cooperation at times, and also some beautiful moments of togetherness. So we just have to kind of focus on that sometimes too.
And I think we can also kind of inject a little positivity as well by incorporating some rituals of gratitude and appreciation. So maybe at dinner time, creating a gratitude ritual where everybody goes around and shares an appreciation or an acknowledgement for other people in the family. It's a great practice. In my family, we call it shout outs. So we're giving shout outs to each other now. But it just creates a different feeling and dynamic that we don't necessarily have together throughout the day when we're managing stress in school and work and all of that together. So sometimes we need a little injection of positivity and connection between siblings, and that's a nice, easy way. Some other families do things like thorns and roses and just sharing positive things that happened during the day, or things that were a struggle. Some families do it once a week, so it's not necessarily you should do this every day, but just being intentional about maybe adding in some of those positive rituals of connection for the family can be nice.
All great ideas. Thank you. I know I have a teen, so I don't know how applicable this is, but we've started doing a weekly family meeting, and we switched the agenda so that each parent and then our daughter gets to choose, and it's funny to see how varied that is. But we've also started doing affirmations, and so during the week we have jars, and we have to do 3, one for ourselves and one for each, and then we read those out loud. So I know that's a little bit older, so I'm not sure how applicable, but it sounds like this particular parent had kids of varying ages, so maybe that would be helpful. And then on the flip side, how do parents, I guess the question is, how do parents take that time that they need for themselves to get that peaceful time when they're, like, for instance, at dinner, when everybody's sort of like on top of each other, or there's that neediness going, but the parent might need to sort of create that time. Any suggestions for modeling that for their kids and asking for that time or taking that time as a parent?
Was the question like, how do we take that time in the middle of dinner, or could you?
I think it was just how to model and productively ask for that time and take that time when they need it. And maybe it's carving that out during the day, during a certain time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I would put it into the routine, right? And I think that this is mommy time and this is daddy time, or, and I think one of the great things that has come out of this, I mean, there's been a lot of social changes. I've had a lot of mothers come in and tell me that they have finally said, and I'm not throwing husbands under the bus, but I'm working too, and I'm taking care of the kids, and I'm doing the laundry, and I need help, right? We need to go to our spouses, and it may be flip-flopped in your house. It may be completely different. Maybe we need to go to a neighbor and say, look, I need you to help me with this, or a grandparent, a good friend, that you're going to carve out that time that you need that to be a better parent for your child. So I think it's okay to put that into the schedule.
Yeah, absolutely. I think having it scheduled, and there are going to be times where everything's just blowing up right at the dinner table, and it's okay to say, I need to excuse myself for 5 minutes because I need to go lock myself in the bathroom and calm down because I'm having a hard time with the volume at this table, right? So it's perfectly okay just to acknowledge I need the space now and step out and let them know I'm coming back. So it's not like, hey, I need a break from you guys, I'm out of here, right? It's just, I need a break and I will be back. But in terms of also self-care, just acknowledging that you are with your kid probably most of the time. And there's a lot that we can do with self-care on a daily basis during our regular routine. So maybe in the morning when you're making breakfast, turn on your podcast, listen to your music. There's small things that we can add into what we're already doing. Or if you're taking a shower, get the fancy shower gel that somebody gave you as a birthday gift that you've been saving. Just make it luxurious for yourself, or light a candle, right? There's small things, or make your coffee before you make everybody else's breakfast. So I think picking out like 3 to 4 things that you can do on a daily basis that really will fuel you, will not only pay off for you, but is really a gift to everybody else in your family, right? So if it's, I'm going to pick up the phone and talk to my mom for 5 minutes a day, or I'm going to just send off an email, or I'm just going to write 3 things in my journal first thing, right? These don't have to be super time consuming. They can be small little things that we add into what we're already doing. So I don't want anybody to feel like, oh, I don't have time for self-care. Are you crazy, ladies, right? Like, how could I do that? I have the child, I have work, I have my partner, I have laundry, right? There's just so much going on. And I think these small little things often can make a really big difference. So being intentional about just adding 3 or 4 things to your daily that will make a difference for you. And it looks different for everybody.
Yeah. And I think I would add that, at least I use this a lot in my work, but I'm thinking if you're on an airplane, not that anyone's been on an airplane for a while, but when the masks come down, you put yours on first, and that is something that you're told to do. And same thing, when you need a moment, you got to take that moment for you.
Yeah. Not going to be able to show up for anybody else if we're not taking care of ourselves first. 100%. Yeah. And there's a ton of apps out there right now too. So you could do a 5-minute meditation specifically around whatever's stressing you out. So just being mindful that like, it doesn't have to be something big. It can be small things. I know for me, a lot of times I will use those meditations when I've driven my kids somewhere, like they had an orthodontist appointment yesterday. Great. I'm going to sit in my car. I'm going to do my 5 minutes, right? So just plugging it into the little windows that already exist in our day makes a big difference. Small things often.
Thank you. I think that's all the questions that I have. If I've missed anyone, please remind me.
Give just a few minutes for people if you have any questions on, and it can be on other topics as well. If there's something that we didn't cover that's really on top of mind right now, feel free to ask. We've got a lot of different perspectives and topics of expertise here. So
I just had one reminder. It was from a parent asking about a younger child. What's a reasonable, again, reasonable is, I know that's not our favorite word, but this is the way this question's phrased. How many minutes can this parent reasonably expect a 3-year-old to focus on a project?
Yeah, I think Dr. Evans might have addressed that really quickly. Do you want to expand, Elizabeth, on that?
10 minutes at most, something they enjoy. Maybe less if it's something that they don't enjoy. We think about circle time and building up that circle time. A lot of teachers in preschool, they'll start very, very small circle time that we're only going to do this for 5 minutes. And then by kindergarten, we should be able to, do that for maybe 15 minutes. So it's pretty short. So, that doesn't mean that if you bring out the crayons that they can't do it for 30 minutes. Some of them may, but they might need, you set them out on a project, 5 minutes later, they're asking you to do something else, right? So it's that attention span of needing, mom, dad, I need something. That attention span is quite small.
Yeah.
I would also add, play around and see how that depends on the amount of attention that you provide, and whether that time is child directed or whether it's parent directed. Because if you're asking a lot of questions, you're giving a lot of commands, then we expect that time to just plummet. Whereas if they're getting a lot of attention for the things that they're doing, a lot of kind of implicit condoning from you that, oh, I see you doing that, or kind of like what Melissa was saying earlier, like, oh, you're using 5 colors. Wow. If you give that kind of attention, you might be able to push that a little bit. Yeah, I agree with everything that Dr. Evans said as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just wanted to add to that too, that I hear this question come up a lot around dinner time. Like, I want my kid to sit at dinner and eat with all of us, and being mindful of those realistic expectations that like 5 to 10, 15 is totally stretching it sitting at the dinner table. And just being mindful that when we ask our kid to sit down for dinner isn't necessarily when we start eating. So being intentional about making sure you're ready, the food's ready, everybody's sitting down, and then calling our kiddo over to come and join us, because that's when the clock starts. Not like, okay, we're sitting down for dinner here, come sit in your chair, and then I'm finishing stuff up that takes another 5 minutes. I hear a lot of frustration from parents around kids not sitting during meals. And it's because they did sit. It just so happens they didn't have food present in front of them just yet.
So I would say for the preschool, when we're thinking about chunking time out, max would be an hour and more realistic would be 30 minutes, but that sustained attention,
right,
that really focused attention is only probably a few minutes to, I would say 3 to 8 minutes of sustained attention in a preschooler is normal.
Great. I have one last question. I know everyone wants to, I'm sure we could go on for a long time, but we're going to respect that everyone has other things to do and just wants to wind down before bed. One last question is, when should a parent consider seeking professional help for social emotional development for a young child? What are some of the warning signs to watch out for?
Well, I would start with just the basic of, if you feel like you're struggling, reach out, outsource, get help, talk to others. I mean, there are amazing parent coaches like Melissa who are wonderful to work with and can give you support and techniques to use. As far as going to a psychologist like Dr. Bell or myself, I think that when it is escalating to the point of every day there's more aggressive behavior, things that would, an occasional hit to brother is to me normal, but now we're hitting the dog and we are pulling the cat's tail every time we're around the cat, or if there's a lot of withdrawal, so we want to stop all activities, we are completely sad, there's lots of tears, there's a huge increase in unexplained behaviors, I think that's the time to really reach out. That we may need more. Yeah, I would say little regressions, little phases, a few more temper tantrums, fine, and we expect that. But when we're seeing a lot more aggressive behavior or isolation, that's concerning to me.
Yeah, I think reaching out and asking for support doesn't necessarily mean there's anything wrong with your child or they have a diagnosis, but just talking to a professional is a great place. So many times parents reach out to me and they think there's something wrong with their child or they think they have a diagnosis, and really it's just the dynamic or the communication between parents and child. So I just reach out to any professional and they will support you. I know for myself, if I feel like there's more going on, then I will refer it out to a therapist that specializes in whatever we're seeing. But most times, like, a lot of these behaviors are typical. It doesn't feel typical because we don't see other kids doing these things. They tend to just do some of these negative things at home. We don't see any kids really doing anything anymore, but we associate, negative behaviors with something being wrong with our child. And a lot of it is just developmentally appropriate. So regardless of who you reach out to, I think just asking lots of questions. And I think all of us, from Dr. Evans to Dr. Bell, myself, like, we have a plethora of referrals. And so just because you're reaching out to a psychologist doesn't mean there's, your child needs a diagnosis. It could be like, oh, great, here's some referrals, or here's another person you should speak to. So don't ever hesitate to ask for support or just have a conversation with a mental health professional.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And especially in this age group, the primary behavioral problem that comes up is issues with compliance or issues with tantrums. And I love doing this kind of behavior management training because it's really not pathologizing. In most cases, there's nothing wrong with the child. There are behaviors or a pattern of behaviors that's developed over time that is causing some problem for the family, right? Whether it's distress among parents or it's, having trouble getting the kid out the door on time for things. But that doesn't necessarily mean that there's anything pathological in this child's development or that the parents did anything to cause this. Right. So what I always say is parents are not the problem, they're the solution. And so, I think, reaching out to somebody can be helpful. And in those moments that you're kind of like, I have no idea what's happening, or I don't know why this behavior is happening more and more and more. That if you are trying something and it's working, great. If it's not working, there's lots of different things to try. And again, whether that's reaching out to somebody and saying, hey, this behavior keeps happening, what do I do about this? Right. Sometimes these interventions can be remarkably quick, especially for problems that are not really severe. So I think that is kind of my answer. And again, for this preschool age range, understanding what's normal, that we expect compliance in the average preschooler about 70% of the time. So basically every 3 commands that you give, we would only expect 2 of them to really be followed. And so if that's happening in your home, great. You've got what sounds like a pretty normal kiddo. And then thinking if you need some help with behavior management strategies, there's lots of great folks out there. There's also a wide range. So looking out for something that is going to work for you and your family and your values.
Yeah. And kind of just piggybacking on what you're saying about their development, that kids this age communicate through their behaviors, right?
Yeah.
So they don't necessarily have the language to express how they're feeling or what they want or desire, or they're not able to make those connections. So sometimes we just need to be a detective and try to look at what's underneath the behavior that's driving it, not just dealing with like what's on the surface. The surface is their attempt to express something that they're just not able to express at this age or stage of their development. So that's totally normal that they're communicating through behavior at this age.
Just a reminder for those of you who have kids in the school system, we do have the school-based counselors, which are amazing resources, and they can help you work through some of those issues as well. So it's a great place to start if your kids are in the school already. And we'll make sure when we send out all of the materials from tonight's program that we include the link to find those counselors if you're looking for them.
Yeah, and I would plug, Michelle, can you add the behavioral toolkit from the Department
Yes.
of that so there's actually, so it has a lot of really helpful tips. It was put out by a working group, and it addresses preschool all the way up to teenagers and helpful hints for each of them. So I love it because it actually has tools that you can use, very concrete things. So Michelle will link that behavioral toolkit.
Yep, we'll send that out. Well, we just want to thank everyone for taking time out of your evening, for being here, for our wonderful panelists who just a wealth of knowledge. And I think we all just need that reassurance that we're not experiencing this on our own. And so we thank you for being here, and hopefully 6 months from now, maybe we can have another program and we'll talk about what do we do with all this activities that we have, and everyone wants to be so busy, and my kids are so social, what do I do? So we don't know where we'll be, but hopefully in a positive space. So thank you all once again, and thank you to Michelle and Youth and Family Services for partnering with us, and especially to our panelists for taking time out of your evening to share your knowledge. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate you doing this.
Thank you all, and just keep breathing. Take those deep breaths.
Have a great night.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.